A woman survives an assault in the New Mexico desert.
What's going on out there?
I ran into a girl. She's just wearing her underwear and a pair of socks.
They found a male, and he was unresponsive.
She had stabbed a man who was trying to rape her.
The crime scene contains clues of something even more disturbing and more than one suspect.
They noticed that there was a man that kept peering up over the rocks and looking down.
The weapon was a so-called ceremonial dagger.
It looked like it had some Egyptian markings, more of a fantasy thing.
There is what appears to be almost overkill. What the hell is going on here?
And when investigators uncover the truth, it leads them to a killer driven by dark obsessions.
She had 2 different social media accounts. One of those referenced satanic worship.
She just became all consumed and obsessed with the occult.
The closer I got, the more hysterical she was panicking about something.
I don't care how tough and crusty of an investigator you are. That's chilling to the bone.
It's March 22nd, 2010, in the foothills outside Albuquerque, New Mexico. Spring is in the air, and hikers are enjoying one of the most popular locations in the area, the Copper Trailhead.
Albuquerque is this amazing desert oasis.
In this particular location, you have a lot of people that get off work, and part of their daily routine is to go and exercise, to just go to get away and find a little peace and solitude.
But a little before 6 p.m., the serenity is shattered by a disturbing discovery.
Albuquerque 911. What's the address to your emergency?
It's actually up in the open space off of Copper.
What's going on out there?
I ran into a girl. She's just wearing her underwear and a pair of socks. She said that she had been raped.
We get the call of a woman that is in the foothills that one of the witnesses came upon, and they immediately dispatch officers.
Before police arrive, bystanders have retrieved the woman's clothes from the scene of the crime. Police find the woman further up the trail near an encampment. She identifies herself as 30-year-old Angela Sanford.
The witnesses described that she had been wearing a bikini top, underwear, and socks, and had blood. She claimed that she had been raped and that the person was close by.
Angela doesn't offer further details on the state of her attacker, but the witnesses say that the male is laying unconscious up the trail. After making sure Angela is safe, officers leave her to be treated by paramedics and begin searching the area.
One of the men who was a witness pointed out to where the person who did it was at, and it was up the trail a little, a distance.
Officers found a male laying kind of in the kneeling, praying position almost, with his pants a little undone, and he was unresponsive. Per protocol for officer safety, he was handcuffed, and then they rolled him over onto his back, and that's when they saw all the stab wounds. He had stab wounds on his chest, and it looked like on his face and in his neck as well. Paramedics were called out to the scene, and they were the ones that actually pronounced him as deceased. He had a wallet on him, and we identified the deceased person that we had in custody as 50-year-old Joe Leyva from Albuquerque.
Detectives and the assigned prosecutor are called to the puzzling scene.
As soon as I arrived, one of the detectives told me that it was their understanding that a woman had stabbed a man who was trying to rape her. Myself and the detectives went up to the crime scene to do a walkthrough. And the first thing you see, of course, is the decedent right there on the ground, handcuffed behind his back. There was a rope on the ground to the right. There was also a dagger on the ground. In the area, there are some people who are just walking through, doing their normal hiking. There are a few witnesses who are standing around waiting to be talked to, including Miss Sanford.
They kept the witnesses there at the scene and started interviewing them immediately.
But to seasoned detectives, the crime scene simply doesn't add up.
Her story was confusing. The whole thing was bizarre. I have a woman that claims that she was raped. She has blood on her. And this man has been stabbed numerous times. And there is what appears to be almost overkill that doesn't fit an act of self-defense. What the hell is going on here?
The officers told my mother early in the a.m. that my father had passed. I remember just breaking down, falling to my knees. We didn't even know what happened.
Joel Leyva was born on June 13, 1957, in Española, New Mexico. He was one of 3 brothers raised in a religious household.
Faith has always been a big part of our family. We didn't get to go out much. We were ministers' kids, pastors' kids. Well, I had 2 older brothers, Joel, and then my older brother, Amos. Amos ended up going to Bible college. Joel was about the same time getting ready to go into the military.
In 1976, my father felt like he had a calling to serve his country, so he decided to join the Marine Corps, and he was enlisted, and he was in there for 4 years.
After his time in the Marines, Joel returned to New Mexico, where he fell in love with a local girl named Betty Lujan.
My father and my mother were a best man, and they made up honor at their family member's wedding, and they kind of they sparked, and they got together and fell in love, and the rest is history, I guess. My parents got married in the early 80s. My mother worked at the courthouse, retired from the state in Mexico. My father was in logistics, shipping and receiving.
Joel and Betty had 2 children together and spent the next 3 decades enjoying family, friends, and the fruits of their labor.
My parents had a great relationship, always laughing, always, having a good time. There was, always jokes and stuff in the house. We did everything together.
He was people person, It didn't take him long to make a friend. He was just friendly to everybody, treated everybody fairly.
My father would definitely help anybody he saw in need of any kind of help. We didn't have much growing up, but he would give his shirt off his back to help somebody.
By 2010, the children had grown up and started families of their own.
The last time I saw my dad, we were just hanging out and having a good time, and just like another day for us. I remember walking out the door, and I looked back and I saw him sitting at the table. Little did I know that I was never going to see him again.
Now, Joel has been found stabbed to death in the New Mexico foothills, and police have been told it was the result of an attempted sexual assault.
Witnesses had initially said that when they came across Angela for the first time, she was wearing blue bikini top, panties, socks, and like a long stocking with holes cut in it to use as a glove. She had blood on her right thigh, and she had blood on her cheek as well.
She said she had gotten on top of him and then stabbed him and ran away. Everything seemed to generally make sense.
Since Angela is too distraught to provide police with more details, officers prepare to take her in for a routine assault examination. But as Angela is removed from the scene, one of the witnesses surprises them with another detail.
They were told from witnesses that there was a possible second suspect. She described him as a 30 or 40-year-old Caucasian male. He was still out there.
Some of the hikers who found Angela direct police to an area near the crime scene.
The witnesses were saying that they noticed up above them on this pretty steep incline, they noticed that there was a man that kept peering up over the rocks and looking down.
They were directed to the boulders above the scene, and that's where officers spotted the second possible suspect. One of the officers withdrew her handgun, pointed it up at the rocks, told him to come down. He complied, he came down, they handcuffed him, and then dragged him out of the scene as well.
The man identifies himself as John Epler and is brought in for further questioning.
We did not have Joel's side of the story. At this point, we could only accept what Angela told us. But I was treating her as a potential homicide suspect.
Coming up, police question a suspect.
I'm thinking, okay, they're going to figure out I'm innocent.
And Angela's story begins to unravel.
When she started becoming super defensive, that told me something was definitely wrong with this picture.
As investigators attempt to piece together an alleged attack that left one man dead, they must interrogate the other living suspect. Before questioning John Epler, detectives further examine the scene and almost immediately notice something that strikes them as odd.
The weapon used to kill Mr. Leyva was a so-called ceremonial dagger.
I found it to be rather fantastical. It looked like it had some Egyptian markings, more of a fantasy thing, more of the type of thing you would display.
For hiking, it was a little strange, but if she's trying to defend herself, yeah, she would use any weapon that she'd find.
I'm asking her, why are you bringing a dagger that you describe as a ceremonial dagger with you? It just didn't add up.
The ornate dagger isn't the only strange piece of evidence they find.
One of the witnesses actually took Angela back so that she could retrieve her clothes. They said when they went to the scene, Angela's clothes were neatly folded, which is kind of unusual.
The fact that her clothes were nicely folded instead of just thrown off like you would think would have happened in something like a rape. That didn't make sense.
While Angela is sent to be inspected by the sexual assault nurse examiners, detectives head to the police station to question their surviving suspect.
Going into the interview with Mr. Epler, I needed to find his if he had any involvement in this whatsoever. Mr. Epler stated that he did not know Joel, he did not know Angela, and that he didn't witness any of what was going on.
Right away, I'm thinking, okay, these are smart people. They're going to know I didn't. They're going to figure this out right away. They're going to know I'm innocent, you know. They're going to figure out I'm innocent. I had a hard day at work, and I decided to relieve some stress and go up to the mountains. And I was just trying to get rid of some energy and wear myself out and be tired so I could sleep. So I wasn't there to walk on the trails. I was there to go up a really difficult ravine. And so I'm cutting across the mesa, and I noticed there's a girl out there off the beaten trails. At the time, the very first thing that came to my mind was a vulnerable female shouldn't be in an isolated area. The closer I got, the more hysterical she was. You could tell she was panicking about something.
Epler says he didn't want to scare the woman, so he kept hiking.
I was probably up there a couple hours at least. On my way down, I get to this kind of a flat area with this big boulder in front of me. And I look over the boulder and I see a bunch of police officers walking the area. And the very first thing that goes through my mind is, you're gonna go to jail. So then my mind says, well, you didn't do anything, what would you go to jail for? I didn't do anything. So I pick my head up over the edge and I look down, and there's a police officer down there, and he looks at me and he says, and he yells at me, hey, get down here. And I said, what's going on? What is going on? And he said, we're gonna find out.
When they ask him why he thought he was going to jail, he gives them an innocent explanation.
I said, hey, I have a confession to make. I got a marijuana pipe in my pocket. So at that point, they bring in these people and they say, we're gonna take a DNA sample. And I said, yes, please do. I want you to take a DNA sample. This will prove my innocence.
At this point, we had no evidence to suggest that John Epler was involved in the alleged rape or raping of Angela Sanford. The impression I got is that he's more of a reluctant witness to this, so he was released without charges.
Now, detectives need to speak with Angela about the misidentified alleged attacker.
Somebody who's gone through something that traumatic, we don't want to not believe them, but I got a call from the detectives. They told me that they had concerns about her story.
It's really common for survivors of rape, sexual assault to not remember everything at first, to misremember things, report things, several days or weeks later as they're processing the trauma that occurred.
We have sexual assault nurse examiners that are trained in the forensic collection of evidence for women who are the victims of sexual violence. And Miss Sanford was taken to be examined. After she was examined, the case agent had an opportunity then to sit down with her.
My initial interview with Angela, the first time I actually talked to her, was at the police station. I believe it was a little after midnight. Angela was displaying signs of being distraught, still distraught.
She starts by saying this was not a random attack. She knew Joel Leyva.
She said that she had contact with him, inviting him to go celebrate the Wiccan holiday up in the foothills. Joel agreed to go up with her.
Miss Sanford said that she had been in the area celebrating the Wiccan holiday of Beltane. And immediately I knew that wasn't true.
Angela Sanford has just revealed to investigators that she invited Joel Leyva to the mountains that day to celebrate a Wiccan ceremony. Detectives have her start from the beginning.
Angela tells us that she had met Joel at the casino a couple days before. she was unemployed. She was looking for a possible job. Joel said he could possibly offer him if she had a resume. They ended up exchanging phone numbers. Then they left the casino. A couple days later, they were texting each other back and forth.
My dad was always meeting new people, always trying to help people out, be that, open ear.
They struck up a relationship, and through phone calls and text messages, she invited him to participate in this Wiccan holiday.
Angela explains that she's a follower of Wicca, a pagan religion whose practitioners are often referred to as witches.
I have never had an incident involving anyone who called themselves a Wiccan witch.
On the 22nd of March, Angela states that Joel called her to check in.
Angela had stated that she was going up to do a Wiccan ceremony up at the foothills and asked him if he wanted to come along.
According to Angela, the ceremony was meant to celebrate a Gaelic holiday known as Beltane.
She claims that she felt it was going to be a time where maybe she could convert him to her faith.
The communication between the two of them only started a few days prior, but they had set up to meet in this particular area.
She said her boyfriend dropped her off at the trailhead.
Joel arrives shortly thereafter and is walking behind her. The two of them had drinks.
Angela says the hike started out innocently enough, but once they got deeper into the wilderness, things took a turn.
She stated that she veered off to the site where she was going to hold the ceremony. They're off the trail now, east of the trailhead, kind of behind some boulders where even if you were walking on the trailhead, you would not have been able to see them at all.
Her account is she gets up to use the restroom and he starts asking, "Can I watch?" And she says, no, and kind of goes and pulls down her pants, and then he comes up behind her. She claims that he then starts fondling her.
She had a rope around her, a ceremonial rope around her waist that she said that he removed and tried to tie her hands with behind her back. But apparently he tied it loose.
Although she'd managed to free herself from the rope, Angela didn't think she could escape without Joel hurting her.
She's talking about how Joel takes this dagger that she had kind of out of her pocket. He's using it kind of against her.
So in cases of sexual assault, common reactions are going to be fawning, which is, kind of trying to make nice with the assailant, sort of just trying to do whatever you can to stay alive.
She said that she grabs the dagger and as an effort to get away, stabbed him about 3 or 4 times and then ran.
As Angela tells this story of her harrowing escape, investigators compare it to what witnesses described at the scene. And there's one detail that just doesn't line up.
She's talking about how she makes this split-second decision, and then she goes off running.
Her clothes were nicely folded and set to the side. Typically, in a rape situation, there's not going to be time for somebody to nicely, neatly fold their clothes.
And to seasoned detectives, the way Angela tells the story is another cause for concern.
Angela was not forthcoming with a lot of details. When she started becoming super defensive and then shut down the interview herself, that told me something was just definitely wrong with this picture.
Coming up, police make an unsettling discovery.
She would post about vampires, dark beings.
And the real reason for Angela and Joelle's wilderness trip is revealed.
All kinds of bells went off at that point. Why would she list him as sacrifice unless that was her actual intent?
After their troubling interview with Angela Sanford, investigators are questioning whether there's more to her wilderness trip with Joelle Leyva than she's willing to share. But they want to tread carefully.
We want to make sure if this person was actually being raped, that we're treating them with respect and courtesy. And we more especially don't want to re-traumatize them.
They begin with an analysis of her sexual assault examination.
Through that examination, they did not find evidence that there was sexual intercourse, and they did not find anything that they believed would be consistent with sexual violence.
No evidence of defensive marks, bruising, or scrapes of anything other than some abrasions, mild abrasions on her knees.
There was nothing, no rope burns, no semen, no anything that would corroborate any belief that she had been sexually assaulted.
To hear those allegations against my father that he could have committed something like that was, I didn't believe it. I was like, there's no way. That's not who he was.
The fact that there was not only no evidence of an actual rape, but no real evidence of an attempted rape, that obviously is a problem for Miss Sanford's story.
The autopsy on Joelle Leyva also disputes some of Angela's claims.
She had said that she had stabbed him about 3 times and then run away. And he was stabbed well over 20 times.
That many stab wounds indicated it was personal. It wasn't defensive in my experience.
When Joelle's loved ones are informed of the circumstances of his death, they find it even harder to believe.
We had so many questions and we just didn't have any answers. A very, very emotional time. Hearing those stories come out and reading about those stories, it just, it was not him.
And the family made it very, very clear that there's no way that he would have gone to practice this Wiccan, witchcraft, pagan holiday. He was a practicing Catholic who was very committed to his faith.
Hearing the word wicked, that was a shock. I remember them asking something about if he practiced it, anything like that. Obviously, he didn't.
He was very well loved by his family. He was married, a large family. He was a very religious man.
The family insists Joelle would never harm another person, let alone commit sexual assault.
When I first heard that she was claiming that he would raped her, Joelle would never rape a woman.
My father, very open, very friendly, very giving. My dad always told us never lay your hands on a woman. I know he believed that, and I know he lived by that. So hearing all that, it made us even more angry.
Still, investigators question why Angela would make up such an elaborate and unusual account. A background check provides some alarming answers.
Angela Sanford, in 1999, had made an allegation of rape. She claimed that she went willingly with 2 guys to a motel. There they did some illegal drugs and she ended up being raped at gunpoint.
But she didn't want to move forward in that case, it seemed. She didn't really have the response to the investigators that they were looking for. She kind of skipped out on the scheduled interview time, and so the case was dropped.
It takes a lot for people to come forward, victims, and disclose that they've been sexually assaulted. So it is possible that it was a legitimate complaint.
To gain insight into Angela's history, officers obtain the contact information for her boyfriend and request that he come to the station for an interview.
He stated that he did drop her off at the trailhead, and she had told him come back in about an hour. So in about an hour, he called. She didn't answer. He called again, didn't answer. So he assumed that she was ignoring him or that she had just turned off the phone.
But according to Angela's boyfriend, the reason she gave for going on the trip is dubious at best.
He told us that she was not a Wiccan witch, that she was a Wiccan wannabe.
Miss Sanford was born and raised here in Albuquerque.
She was born into a family where there was considerable dysfunction, and she described her relationship with her father as one of fear and hatred.
At 19, Angela moved to Illinois with her boyfriend at the time, and they both were into the alternative religions, the occult, and paganism. She sort of began to lean more into the occult, which could possibly have just been a way to escape that wasn't solely pagan or solely Wiccan. She would go into the woods alone with books, candles, other things to do, rituals that she felt were, aligned into these beliefs. She was making her own kind of conglomerate of a religion.
It almost felt like you didn't want to tread too far down because you weren't really sure what you were going to find out and if you wanted to know.
After that, I had my doubts about Angela's story.
Investigators have just gained insight into Angela Sanford's complicated history and obsession with dark magic. Despite her past, Angela's boyfriend says he doesn't believe she's capable of such a brutal crime.
He defended Miss Sanford vigorously, that there is no way that she would have done this, that he completely supported her story.
The boyfriend was kind of this crux piece that gave you an insight to who she was in the days leading up to this and what she's watching, what she's indulging in, and how that led to this very real situation.
When investigators take a look at Angela Sanford's online alter ego, they find evidence of a deeply troubled woman.
She had 2 different social media accounts, one of those being a MySpace account, I believe at the time, and that had a lot more of like pentagrams and things that really referenced more of a satanic lifestyle, a satanic worship.
Angela was very active on her social media. She would post about vampires, dark beings. She also was very interested in serial killers and the notoriety that they would gain from their crimes.
Sometimes when you have somebody who really gets enthralled with serial killers, enthralled with the idea of murder, they start fantasizing about murder.
Detectives are unfamiliar with any of the rituals and beliefs Angela was practicing, so they reach out to local experts.
I called the local coven, and I ended up speaking to them. And they ended up telling me that Beltane usually occurs in May, not in March when this incident occurred.
Detectives subpoena Angela's phone records to see for themselves what Angela and Joel discussed.
Angela says they meet at the casino, right? And kind of just spark up a conversation, agree to kind of meet again. She started to claim that he was the one who reached out. And it wasn't until the phone records came back that detectives realized, no, she called him. She told him, I want to see you, and let's get together.
But it's clear the invitation had nothing to do with convincing Joel to convert.
When I finally found his contact in her phone, she didn't list him as Joel Leva or just Joel. She listed him as Sacrifice. All kinds of bells went off at that point. She told us that she was there for a Wiccan ceremony. Why would she list him as Sacrifice? Unless that was her actual intent in meeting Joel in the first place.
The revelation confirms investigators' worst suspicions.
The fact that she listed him as Sacrifice, the fact that she lured him to a spot where nobody could see them, all led me to believe that she had intentionally planned this out to kill Joel as part of her so-called Wiccan celebration. Motive answers why. The only person that could answer that one is Angela herself, okay? She's the only one that could tell us why she did what she did.
On March 24th, 2 days after Joel's death, Angela is arrested.
It was disturbing and made me, frankly, feel better as we were about to go to a grand jury to say, this is a predetermined first-degree murder and that she needed to be charged for it.
Despite the evidence against Angela, prosecutors still fear a jury might sympathize with her.
This is a woman that has had a history of relationships with abusive men.
If she was able to convince one or more jurors that what she had initially said was true, then she could have certainly hung a jury, and then the murderer potentially goes free.
Following Angela Sanford's arrest, word of the disturbing case spreads quickly through the town of Albuquerque. But not everyone is pleased by the publicity.
There was a lot of concern from people in the Wiccan community that we were trying to paint the Wiccan community as somebody who would be into committing murder as a part of a ceremony and things like that. And so from the very beginning, we tried to be very clear that we didn't believe that this was truly a Wiccan ceremony.
I learned that Wiccans don't sacrifice. Beltane was about celebrating the earth, the renewal of the earth.
It's a very generally nature-based religion, a very peaceful religion.
Prosecutors believe Angela's twisted interpretation of the rituals were a pretense for murder.
What would drive this woman to take this victim, this man that she met at a casino, and lure him basically to the mountains and murder him in cold blood? Clearly, in my mind, she targeted him.
And this identity was her compensatory mechanism of having power as a solution for her early life where she felt she didn't have any.
Jonathan told us, he wanted to do the plea deal because you never know what could happen in a trial. Ultimately, we agreed to it.
We decided to offer a second-degree murder that was aggravated. We wanted the guarantee of a conviction.
Angela accepts the plea deal, and in December 2011, she appears in court for sentencing.
There was a bunch of us in the family that showed up in court. And that's what we all saw her for the first time. I know she looked at me because I look a little bit like Joelle. So our eyes caught. She looked at me for a second, we just stared at each other. And I just stared at her like, took my brother, really?
Angela's lawyers ask for a reduced sentence, arguing that her perception of reality is impaired.
It didn't ever feel like she really was attuned to what was kind of happening around her. You almost got the sense from her that it's like she didn't understand where her fantasy ended and where reality began.
However, they are unable to produce any witnesses to support her.
I don't remember anybody coming to speak on her behalf to try to convince the judge to give her a lesser sentence. And ultimately, he didn't. He gave her the maximum sentence he was allowed to.
She doesn't give a statement. The information that we have is she felt like she had to sacrifice somebody. And regrettably, that person was Mr. Leyva.
As a family, 20 years is not enough for what she did, what she admitted to doing. Should have been life in prison and never see the light of day again.
This was somebody who lured somebody to this location to complete a human sacrifice. I don't care how tough and crusty of an investigator you are, that's chilling to the bone.
I'd feel for the family of Mr. Leyva. They lost a good man.
Yeah, I miss you, Joelle. I miss you, bro. I love you. I'll never forget you. All that's memories that I'll cherish and keep forever.
There's probably not a day that goes by I don't think of him. There's not a day that goes by I don't think about my dad. Riding in my truck to work, a song comes on the radio, and I know my dad loves this song, and I just feel the sense that he's with me.
A sudden, chilling intuition urged him to hesitate. Following his duty, he slowly pulled open the closet door. Inside, the tragic reality of what had occurred was laid bare. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were gone, their lives taken in an unspeakably violent and cruel manner. They had been bound tightly with duct tape, and their heads and mouths were covered in layers of the thick adhesive. The scene was incredibly chaotic and bloody, indicating a fierce struggle. For the responding officer, the sight was a devastating shock that momentarily stole his ability to speak or even use his radio to call for backup. When the homicide detectives arrived, led by veterans who had spent over 21 years investigating the city's darkest corners, they too were deeply shaken. It was clear that the couple had been subjected to severe physical force before their passing. Initial clues scattered around the apartment seemed to point in many directions. There was a plate with crushed prescription pills on a table, a discarded marijuana cigarette, and a light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle. To the investigators, these items felt almost too deliberate, like a carefully staged theatrical scene. The light blue bandana was a color often associated with active local gangs known for extorting local businesses, and at first a robbery or gang extortion gone wrong seemed like the most logical theory. Yet, experienced detectives knew that sometimes things that appear too perfect are designed to mislead. Real gang members rarely left such neat, obvious calling cards after committing such extreme crime. They suspected the scene had been staged to throw them off the track. As the community mourned the loss of the sweet, generous couple who had never bothered a soul, the police began the painstaking process of interviewing family members and collecting forensic evidence. Because Chow Tran spoke the most fluent English, he became the primary spokesperson for the grieving family. He explained to detectives that the family had gathered the previous evening to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. The elderly couple had enjoyed themselves, staying until 10:30 before receiving a ride home. That was the last time anyone admitted to seeing them alive. Chow painted a picture of a sewing business that, despite their best efforts, had fallen on hard times. They had once secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major commercial, giant, even producing items for Disney. But by 2011, that contract was lost, and the business began a steep downward spiral. Desperate to save their livelihood and protect their family from financial ruin, the couple turned to the deeply rooted spiritual traditions of their youth. In many traditional cultures, when a family faces sudden, overwhelming misfortune such as bankruptcy or severe legal trouble, they seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to perform cleansing rituals and ward off perceived curses. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong, discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a unique ability to lift powerful curses and bring immense good fortune to those in need. Hoping to turn their luck around, Chow and Hong traveled to Houston to consult with Daphne. She performed elaborate rituals, promising that their business would soon flourish once more. But rather than bringing prosperity, this relationship marked the beginning of a much darker chapter. Over the course of a year, as the business continued to struggle, the family became deeply indebted to Daphne. She ran her spiritual services on credit, and the debt quickly ballooned to an astronomical sum of between $250,000 and $280,000. As the investigation into the murders deepened, detectives uncovered a major financial detail. The elderly couple had life insurance policies totaling at least $1 million, with Chow Tran named as a beneficiary. When questioned about the policy, Chow maintained that it was a standard business precaution meant to ensure the family could sustain the sewing business if one of them were to pass away. He and his family provided what appeared to be airtight alibi for the night of the crime, explaining they had been playing cards together until late in the evening. For over 2 years, the case remained cold. The forensic samples collected from the crime scene, including the DNA from the discarded marijuana cigarette, did not match anyone in the national databases. It was a frustrating period of silence for the investigators, who refused to let the memory of Long and Hong fade. The breakthrough finally came in 2015, triggered by an entirely unrelated and almost bizarre event. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for a felony involving the theft of a horse near Houston because he had been a 16-year-old minor at the time of the murders in 2012. His DNA had never been entered into the national database, but as an adult felon in 2015, his profile was finally registered, triggering an immediate and perfect match with the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette at the Arlington crime scene. When detectives brought Willie in for questioning, the young man quickly broke down. He confessed that he had been present, but insisted he was merely a follower. He pointed the finger at his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory, who had enlisted his help for a job in Arlington. According to Willie, they had been given a key to the apartment to stage a burglary. An entire crime scene, including the bandana, the pills, and the marijuana, had been carefully set up to make it look like the work of local gang members. Most shocking of all was Willie's revelation that the entire crime was a murder-for-hire plot, orchestrated by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor. Willie recalled hearing Daphne tell his uncle that the family owed her a vast sum of money, and that if they did not pay up, she wanted them dead. Armed with this information, the police arrested Bobby Guillory in December of 2015. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, also confessed, expressing deep remorse and fear. He admitted that Daphne had targeted his financial desperation, offering him $10,000 to carry out the deed. He revealed that Daphne had learned of the substantial life insurance policies and saw them as the only way to collect a massive debt she felt she was owed. Bobby then dropped a final, stunning bombshell. He claimed that the key to the apartment had come directly from Chow Tran. Detectives were stunned by this revelation of familial betrayal. They focused their efforts on Daphne Wright, arresting her at her Houston home in late 2016. A search of her residence revealed detailed business ledgers showing she charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services and curse removals. Despite her cold and defiant demeanor, the evidence against her was mounting. To secure a conviction against the mastermind, prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, truthful testimony. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as an incredibly greedy and manipulative woman who exercised a powerful, almost hypnotic control over his mind and body. He claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had been so terrified of Daphne's spiritual wrath that she had actually suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay the debt. While investigators found this claim highly implausible, Chow's testimony was crucial. He admitted to leaving the apartment key under a doormat for the perpetrators under Daphne's instructions. In September 2019, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder, sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the tragedy. Though the lack of charges against Chow Tran left a lingering sense of incompletion for the detectives who had dedicated years to the case, they found solace in knowing that the truth had finally been brought into the light. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, two gentle souls who had crossed the world in search of a peaceful life, was honored by the tireless pursuit of justice, leaving a powerful lesson about the dangers of greed and the enduring strength of truth. The humid morning air of Arlington, Texas, was quiet on the 10th of June in the year 2012. The sun had barely begun to cast its long, golden fingers across the manicured lawns of the residential neighborhoods when the peace of the early hour was broken. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, a telephone rang in the emergency dispatch center. On the other end of the line was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant whose voice trembled with quiet, mounting anxiety. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The dispatcher, accustomed to the calm routine of early Sunday mornings, listened carefully as Chow spelled out the names, explaining that his father-in-law was a gentle man in his early 70s. Chow explained that his family had gathered outside the apartment, worried because no one was answering the door, and they had noticed an open window that simply did not look right. Too terrified to venture inside themselves, they waited on the pavement, praying that their fears were merely the product of overactive imaginations. Within minutes, a responding officer arrived at the scene. Officer Weller, a seasoned professional with 14 years of experience, immediately felt a shift in the atmosphere. This did not look like a typical welfare check. An entire family was standing outside the quiet apartment complex in the early light of dawn, their faces painted with a mixture of hope and dread. Stepping to the front door, Weller called out, his voice echoing in the stillness of the home. There was no answer. The living room, kitchen, and bathroom were empty, though they bore the unsettling signs of disarray. The only room left to check was the master bedroom. Weller entered, scanning the space with his flashlight, initially seeing nothing that stood out. He turned to leave, feeling a brief wave of relief, thinking perhaps the family had simply gone out for an early morning stroll. But as he reached the threshold, his flashlight caught something on the wall next to a very small closet. They were hand smudges, dark and frantic. A heavy silence fell over the room as Weller hesitated. Every instinct told him to walk away, but his duty compelled him forward. He reached out and opened the closet door. What he discovered inside was a scene of profound sorrow and shocking cruelty. Long and Hong, the beloved patriarch and matriarch of the family, were huddled inside, bound tightly with duct tape. It was immediately clear that they had passed away. For Weller, even with his years on the force, the shock was paralyzing. He walked out of the bedroom, unable to speak or even use his radio for several long moments. When he finally gathered his composure, he requested a supervisor and a crime scene unit. Soon, Detective Stewart, a veteran homicide investigator with 21 years of experience, arrived at the apartment. The scene was deeply troubling. It was clear that a struggle had begun the moment the elderly couple crossed their threshold. There was evidence of a violent disturbance near the front entrance, with traces of a struggle leading all the way to the back room. The apartment had been ransacked, with compact discs scattered across the floor, suggesting a robbery. Yet, to the experienced eyes of detectives, some of the clues felt almost too deliberate. On the coffee table sat a plate of crushed prescription pills and a discarded marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped neatly around a beer bottle, left on display like a calling card. The local gang unit confirmed that the blue bandana was associated with active local gangs known for extortion, but the investigators remained skeptical. The scene felt staged, as if someone had meticulously arranged the clues to point the finger at local street thugs, masking a much more personal and dark motive. To understand why anyone would wish to harm Long and Hong, one had to understand their journey. The couple had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing with them their 3 children, their treasured traditions, and a shared dream of building a prosperous legacy. They settled in Arlington, a vibrant city with a large, supportive Vietnamese community that had flourished since the late 1970s. Long and Hong started a commercial sewing business, working tirelessly to establish themselves. They enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow, who spoke the fluent English necessary to secure contracts and manage relationships with corporate clients. For nearly a decade, their hard work paid off, culminating in a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, including well-known brands like Disney. However, by the year 2011, their good fortune began to fade. The loss of the Disney contract dealt a heavy blow to the family business, and they found themselves slipping into financial distress. In accordance with traditional beliefs, the family sought a spiritual solution to lift what they perceived as a persistent curse on their livelihood. For generations, many in their homeland believed that a spiritual advisor could offer protection, healing, and a way to restore harmony during times of crisis. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in Houston. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she could remove bad curses and bring immense good fortune to those in need. Hoping to save the family business, Chow traveled to Houston to consult with Daphne. She performed a series of rituals, and for a short time, the family felt a renewed sense of hope. Yet, the business did not recover, and the family sank deeper into debt. Instead of seeking a different path, Chow continued to place his trust in Daphne, purchasing her expensive services on credit. Over the course of months, the outstanding balance ballooned to a staggering sum of between $250,000 and $280,000. Daphne, operating as a spiritual loan shark, grew increasingly impatient and demanding. She made it clear that she expected to be paid, one way or another, and she possessed a cold determination that terrified the family. As the investigation into the double homicide began, detectives interviewed the family members. Chow, acting as a primary spokesperson, provided a seemingly airtight alibi. He explained that on the night of the tragedy, the entire family had gathered at his home to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. The elderly couple had enjoyed themselves, staying until 10:30 before receiving a ride home from another relative. Chow cooperated fully, providing timelines and answering questions. which initially kept him from being viewed as a primary suspect. DNA and fingerprint samples were collected from the family, but none matched the evidence left on the marijuana cigarette at the crime scene. With no matches in the national database, the case slowly went cold, remaining unresolved for over 2 years. The breakthrough came in the year 2015 through an unexpected turn of events. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for stealing a horse in Houston, a felony in the state of Texas. Because Willie had been only 16 years old and a minor at the time of the murders in 2012, his DNA had not been in the national database. Now, as an adult with a felony conviction, his profile was entered into the system, triggering an immediate match with the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette left at the stage crime scene in Arlington. When detectives brought Willie in for questioning, the young man quickly broke down. He confessed his involvement, but revealed that he had not acted alone. He had been led by his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. Willie explained that on the 9th of June in 2012, they had made the 3-hour drive from Houston to Arlington, armed with a key to the apartment, which had been provided to them to make entry effortless. They staged the burglary. They scattered items, left a beer bottle wrapped in the blue bandana, and waited. When Long and Hong returned home, a struggle ensued, and the couple was tragically incapacitated and bound. Willie's confession pointed directly to the mastermind behind the entire plot, Daphne Wright. Willie explained that Daphne had approached his uncle, claiming that a family owed her a substantial amount of money, and that she wanted them dead if they did not pay. Armed with this explosive information, detectives tracked down Bobby Guillory in December of 2015. Faced with the evidence, Bobby also confessed, placing the blame entirely on Daphne. He revealed that Daphne had promised him $10,000 to carry out the deed. He also disclosed a shocking detail. The key to the apartment had come directly from Chow Tran. The revelation of Chow's involvement stunned the investigators, who had built a relationship of trust with him over the years. It became clear that the financial pressure and the fear of Daphne's spiritual influence had driven Chow to a desperate act. Detectives learned that Chow and his wife were the beneficiaries of a life insurance policy valued at $1 million. Daphne, realizing she could recoup her massive debt through the insurance payout, had pushed for the ultimate sacrifice. Chow claimed that his mother-in-law had even suggested sacrificing herself to save the family from Daphne's wrath, though investigators found this claim entirely hard to believe. In August of 2016, detectives arrested Daphne right at her home in Houston. A search of her residence revealed detailed ledgers showing that she charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services. Despite her cold refusal to cooperate, the state built a powerful case against her. To secure a conviction against the mastermind, prosecutors made a difficult decision to offer Chow Tran immunity in exchange for his testimony. In August of 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright began. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a greedy and controlling figure who held immense psychological sway over his mind and body, while the defense argued that Chow was a complicit actor who orchestrated the plot for financial gain. The jury ultimately found Daphne guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, though the detectives felt a lingering sense of injustice that Chow did not face prison time for his role. They took comfort in the knowledge that the truth had finally been brought to light, and the memory of Long and Hong had been honored with the pursuit of justice. The morning sun of early summer always brought a certain warmth to the streets of Arlington, Texas, a city known for its vibrant tapestry of cultures and the quiet resilience of its neighborhoods. On the morning of June the 10th, 2012, at 7:29 in the morning, that peaceful atmosphere was met with a sudden, anxious call to the emergency dispatchers. The voice on the other end belonged to Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who had made this country his home. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. His voice trembled with a mixture of confusion and concern as he explained that his family had gathered outside the apartment. They had noticed an open window, and things simply did not look right. Too terrified to step inside, they waited on the pavement, hoping for reassurance. When the responding officers arrived, they immediately sensed that this was different from a typical Sunday morning call. Families did not usually gather outside so early unless something was deeply amiss. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience, stepped through the threshold. The apartment was in complete disarray. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered, and the silence inside was heavy. After checking the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, he entered the bedroom. Initially, the room seemed empty, but as Weller turned to leave, his flashlight caught faint hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet. An instinct, honed by years of service, urged him to investigate. When he opened the closet door, the gravity of the tragedy unfolded. Inside were the elderly couple, Long and Hong, bound with duct tape. There was no life left in them. The shock was immediate. For a seasoned police force, even those with decades of experience in homicide, this was a moment of profound sadness. Detective Stewart, who had spent 21 years investigating the city's darkest corners, arrived to find a scene that shook him to his core. The apartment had been ransacked, but the sheer force of the tragedy felt intensely personal. On the coffee table, investigators found a plate of crushed prescription pills and a marijuana cigarette. Nearby, a light blue bandana was wrapped around a beer bottle. To the initial observer, these clues pointed directly toward active local gangs who were known to operate in the area. Yet, experienced detectives knew that sometimes a scene that appears too perfect is actually a stage. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, carrying with them a deep love for their heritage and a dream of building a legacy for their three children and grandchildren. They established a commercial sewing business, relying on their son-in-law, Chow, to act as the English-speaking face of the company. For nearly a decade, their hard work paid off, eventually securing lucrative contracts with major commercial giants, including Disney. However, by the year 2011, the tide of fortune had turned. The contracts ended, and the business began to struggle. In moments of great uncertainty, people often reach back to the ancient traditions of their homeland for comfort and guidance. For generations, many believed that spiritual advisors could offer protection, heal family rifts, and lift the heavy weight of bad luck. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in Houston. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she could remove obstacles and bring good fortune. Desperate to save the family business, Chow contacted her, and she agreed to perform a ritual. For a time, the family felt a renewed sense of hope. But instead of prosperity, a shadow began to fall over them. Behind the scenes, the financial demands of these spiritual services began to escalate. The family, driven by faith and fear, continued to pour their remaining resources into the rituals, running up a debt that ballooned to somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. In the days following the discovery, detectives worked tirelessly. They learned that the cause of death for the sweet, hard-working couple was suffocation due to the extensive layers of duct tape. It was a heart-wrenching revelation for the family and the community who loved them. During the initial interviews, Chow explained that the family had been celebrating his father-in-law's birthday the night before, and the elderly couple had been dropped off at their home around 10:30. The family members all had airtight alibis, having spent the evening together playing cards until late. Then a new piece of information surfaced. Detective Stewart received a call from an insurance company disclosing that the deceased couple held life insurance policies totaling over $1 million, with Chow Tran named as a beneficiary. When questioned, Chow explained that the policies were intended to ensure the commercial sewing business could survive if anything happened to the founders. Without definitive evidence, police collected DNA and fingerprints from the family, hoping to find a match with the evidence left at the scene, particularly the marijuana cigarette. However, the results returned with no matches in the national database. The investigation slowed, and for 2 years, the case grew cold. The breakthrough came in the year 2015 through an unexpected turn of events. A young man named Willie Guillory, who was 16 years old at the time of the crime, was arrested for a felony involving the theft of a horse. Because he had become an adult and a felon, his DNA profile was entered into the system. It was an exact match for the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette at the crime scene. When detectives questioned Willie, the young man broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. His uncle, Bobby Guillory, had brought him along to Arlington on that fateful night in June of 2012. According to Willie, Bobby had been given a key to the apartment to stage a burglary, leaving the bandana, the pills, and the cigarette to mislead the police. Bobby Guillory was arrested in Katy, Texas, on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the evidence, Bobby also confessed, pointing the finger at the spiritual advisor, Daphne Wright. He explained that he had been struggling financially and was promised $10,000 by Daphne to carry out the deed. Daphne, acting as a spiritual lender, was determined to collect the massive debt owed to her, knowing of the substantial life insurance policies. She had allegedly orchestrated the plan to recoup her money. When asked how she had obtained the key to the apartment, Bobby claimed she had received it directly from Chow Tran. The revelation of potential betrayal within the family stunned the investigators. On August 31st, 2016, detectives arrested Daphne Wright at her Houston home. Inside, they discovered detailed ledgers showing she charged tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services. As the legal proceedings moved forward, prosecutors sought to build an airtight case against the mastermind. In exchange for his full testimony, Chow Tran was offered immunity. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow testified about the immense control Daphne held over their minds and lives, portraying her as a greedy figure who would stop at nothing to secure her funds. He admitted to leaving the key under a mat on her instructions, while the defense argued that Chow was a complicit partner motivated by the insurance payout. The jury ultimately focused on the architect of the conspiracy. In September of 2019, Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Willie and Bobby Guillory also faced justice for their roles. While the legal resolution left some questions about the full extent of family involvement unanswered, the dedication of the police force ensured that those who directly orchestrated and executed the tragedy were held accountable, bringing a quiet sense of closure and a reminder of the enduring power of truth to the Arlington community. The morning sun rose over quiet, tree-lined streets of Arlington, Texas, casting a golden warmth across the rooftops of a community built on hope, hard work, and the enduring strength of family. In this bustling city, where different cultures merge into a vibrant tapestry, one could find a thriving neighborhood where many families of Vietnamese heritage had built their homes. Among them, none were more cherished, more gentle, or more deeply respected than an elderly couple named Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had journeyed to the United States in the year 2000, carrying with them little more than their time-honored traditions, a few cherished belongings, and an abundance of love for their 3 children and grandchildren. They were people of peace, known throughout their neighborhood for their warm smiles and their gentle, generous spirits. Long and Hong believed wholeheartedly in the American dream, a dream they sought to build not just for themselves, but as a lasting legacy for the generations that would follow them. Upon settling in Texas, they poured their hearts into creating a commercial sewing business. To help them navigate the unfamiliar landscape of a new country, They enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old immigrant who possessed a strong command of the English language. Chow became the public face of the business, coordinating with contractors and managing the daily operations, while the elderly couple focused on the intricate artistry of their craft. For nearly a decade, their dedication bore fruit, culminating in a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, producing items for renowned names such as Disney. It was a time of abundance, laughter, and shared celebration. However, as the years progressed toward the year 2011, the winds of fortune began to shift. The prestigious contracts faded away, and the once thriving sewing business began to experience a challenging decline. In times of difficulty, the human spirit often seeks comfort in the beliefs and customs of its homeland. For thousands of years, ancient traditions had taught that spiritual harmony was deeply connected to earthly prosperity. When faced with hardships, such as financial strain, families would sometimes seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to bring protection, healing, and a renewal of good fortune. Hoping to restore their family's blessings, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, searched through a local Vietnamese newspaper. There, they discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a unique ability to lift obstacles, dissolve negativity, and invite positive energy into the lives of those who sought her help. Encouraged by the promise of a brighter future, Chow made contact with her, and soon the family began to place their trust in her spiritual rituals, hoping for a turnaround in their business. Yet, as the months stretched into the year 2012, the family remained caught in a difficult financial cycle. Despite the mounting challenges, their love for one another never wavered. On a warm evening in early June, the family gathered together to celebrate Long's birthday. It was a joyful occasion filled with shared meals, friendly games of cards, and the bright laughter of grandchildren. Long and Hong smiled warmly, surrounded by the family they had worked so hard to nurture. When the party drew to a close around 10 o'clock in the evening, the elderly couple received a ride back to their apartment, their hearts full of the simple joy of being loved. The following morning, June 10, 2012, began with an unusual silence. At 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers received a call from Chow Tran. He expressed deep concern for his elderly in-laws, noting that they had not answered their door and that an open window at their apartment suggested something was amiss. When police officers arrived at the scene, they met the gathered family members waiting outside, too anxious to enter on their own. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience, was the first to enter the residence. The apartment was in complete disarray, showing clear signs of disturbance. Walking to the quiet rooms, Officer Weller called out, but received no response. After checking the living room, kitchen, and bathroom, only the bedroom remained. At first glance, the room appeared empty, but as the officer turned to leave, hand smudges on the wall next to a small closet caught his attention. With a cautious hand, he opened the closet door. Inside, the search reached a tragic end. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were found, bound with duct tape, having succumbed to a senseless act of violence. The severity of the crime left even the most seasoned officers in a state of quiet shock. Detective Stewart, a veteran homicide investigator with 21 years of experience, arrived soon after, determined to bring clarity and justice to a scene that seemed to defy reason. At first, the physical evidence pointed toward gang-related activity. A light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle had been left on a table, alongside other items meant to suggest a robbery carried out by local youths. Yet, Detective Stewart's experience, I remained skeptical. The scene felt too staged, the clues too deliberately placed. It seemed as though someone had gone to great lengths to create an illusion, masking a much more personal and deeply rooted motive. As the investigation unfolded, detectives began to explore every possible avenue. They conducted interviews with over 50 neighbors, friends, and associates. They learned that the elderly couple was universally loved, with no known enemies. Seeking to understand the financial landscape of the family, investigators discovered that a substantial life insurance policy, valued at over $1 million, was in place, with Chow Tran named as one of the primary beneficiaries. When questioned, Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the continuity of the family business in the event of an untimely tragedy. He and his family provided consistent alibis for the night of the occurrence, and initial DNA samples collected from the scene did not match any family members or any profiles existing in the national databases. For more than 2 years, the case remained quiet, yet the dedication of the Arlington Police Department never faltered. The breakthrough finally arrived in October of the year 2015. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had been 16 years old at the time of the crime, was arrested on an unrelated felony charge in Houston, which required his DNA profile to be entered into the national database. Within days, the system identified a perfect match between Willie's DNA and the evidence recovered from the Arlington apartment years earlier. When brought in for questioning, the weight of the truth became too heavy for Willie to carry. He broke down and confessed, revealing that he had not acted alone. He had been accompanied by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 49-year-old man who had been struggling with severe financial difficulties. Willie explained that the entire event had been an orchestrated plan initiated by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor from Houston. Daphne had allegedly claimed that the family owed her a massive debt for her services, an amount totaling between $250,000 and $280,000. When the family was unable to pay, she had reportedly devised a plan to collect the funds through the couple's life insurance policies, hiring Bobby and Willie to carry out the act. In December 2015, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory. Confronted with the evidence, Bobby also confessed, confirming that Daphne had promised him $10,000 to perform the task. He claimed that Daphne had provided him with a key to the apartment, which he had allegedly obtained from Chow Tran himself. Armed with this critical information, investigators focused their attention on Daphne Wright. A search of her Houston residence revealed extensive ledgers documenting enormous fees charged to various clients for spiritual services, while Daphne maintained her silence. Prosecutors recognized the need for decisive evidence to secure a conviction against the primary. Organizers of the plot, they reached an agreement with Chow Tran, offering him immunity in exchange for his full and detailed testimony. During the trial in August of the year 2019, Chow testified before the court, painting a vivid picture of family caught in a web of fear and perceived spiritual obligation. He described how they felt overwhelmed by the immense debt and the believed influence of the spiritual advisor. In September of 2019, after careful deliberation, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, bringing a profound sense of justice and closure to a long and complex journey. Though the path to truth was filled with challenges, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong will remain a guiding light for all who knew them. Their lives, defined by love, unity, and an unwavering commitment to their family, left an indelible mark on the community of Arlington, serving as a lasting reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of justice. The sun rose over Arlington, Texas, casting a bright, golden light across the bustling streets where the stories of countless families intertwined. In this vibrant city, where community was defined by perseverance and shared dreams, an extraordinary journey of hope, truth, and resilience was about to unfold. Among those who had come to build their lives in this promising land were Long Nguyen and Hong Le, a deeply loved elderly Vietnamese couple who had arrived in the United States in the year 2000. They brought with them not only their cherished family, but also a rich tapestry of time-honored traditions an unwavering work ethic, and an enduring belief in the American dream. Establishing a commercial sewing business, they worked side by side with their family members, including their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who often served as the public face of the business due to his fluent English. For many years, their dedication blossomed, earning them lucrative partnerships with major commercial giants, including Disney. However, as the global market shifted, the sewing business faced unexpected challenges, and the steady stream of contracts began to slow. Guided by their traditional cultural beliefs, the family sought a spiritual solution to protect their livelihood, hoping to find a path toward renewed prosperity and peace of mind. In their search for guidance, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law discovered an advertisement in a local Vietnamese newspaper for a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. Believing that her traditional ceremonies could help lift the heavy burdens hanging over their business, the family reached out to her. Initial consultations felt promising, and they invested deeply in the hope of a brighter future. Yet, as the months passed, the financial obligations tied to these intricate rituals grew exponentially, escalating into a massive debt of over $250,000. Unbeknownst to the gentle couple, a shadow of greed had begun to loom over their lives. When the debt became an insurmountable mountain, the demand for payment took a dark turn, culminating in a secret, tragic plot. On the morning of June 10th, 2012, after the family had celebrated Long's birthday the evening before, a call was placed to emergency services requesting a welfare check. Responding officers arrived at the apartment to find a scene staged to look like a chaotic burglary. But the ultimate discovery of the elderly couple brought a profound sadness to the entire community. Even veteran investigators, seasoned by years of challenging cases, were deeply moved by the loss of two such gentle souls who had never brought harm to anyone. The initial investigation faced numerous complex twists, including intentionally planted clues designed to mislead authorities into believing local gangs were responsible. A blue bandana, a discarded glass bottle, and other staged items were left behind to create a false trail. Despite these challenges, the investigators remained steadfastly dedicated to uncovering the absolute truth. For more than 2 years, the case remained quiet, but the dedicated officers never truly closed the book. The breakthrough came in the year 2015 through a remarkable twist of fate, involving a young man named Willie Guillory, whose DNA was entered into the national database following an unrelated felony offense. When his genetic profile matched the evidence recovered from the stage scene, the truth began to unravel. During a compassionate yet rigorous interview with law enforcement, Willie broke down and confessed to his involvement, revealing that he'd been brought along by his uncle, Bobby Guillory. He explained that they had been hired by Daphne Wright, who had devised a plan to recover her funds through the family's substantial life insurance policies. Bobby Guillory was quickly apprehended and, facing the weight of his actions, also confessed, confirming that Daphne was the true architect of the scheme. As investigators dug deeper into the financial records, they uncovered ledgers detailing the massive sums Daphne charged her clients under the guise of spiritual protection. The subsequent trial in August of 2019 brought these complex events to light, offering the community a powerful lesson in the importance of transparency, the dangers of extreme superstition, and the ultimate triumph of justice over deception. Though some questions regarding individual responsibilities remained, the resolution of the case brought a profound sense of closure. It served as a lasting tribute to the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Le, reminding everyone that even in the face of temporary darkness, the light of truth, community solidarity, and dedicated public service will always prevail to restore peace and hope. The morning sun had barely managed to crest the horizon over Arlington, Texas, casting long, tentative shadows across the concrete parking lot of the apartment complex. The air was already heavy with the promise of summer heat, but inside the chest of Chow Tran, everything felt cold. He stood near the brick facade of the building, his hands trembling as he pressed his cellular telephone to his ear. The time was exactly 7 hours and 29 minutes on the morning of June 10th, 2012. When an emergency dispatcher answered, Chow felt his throat tighten. He explained, in his heavily accented but clear English, that he needed a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. The dispatcher, maintaining a calm and professional demeanor, asked for the names of the individuals inside the residence. Chow took a ragged breath and spelled the name of his father-in-law, stating the first name as Long and the last name as Wengyn, adding that the gentleman was 70-something years old at the time. As he spoke, a wave of panic washed over him. He looked toward his wife and his teenage son, who were standing closer to the apartment window. Chow cried out into the receiver, telling the dispatcher that his son and his wife had looked through the window and saw everything. Fallen down, in total disarray, the dispatcher assured him that officers were being sent to location immediately. Chow had initially sent his teenage son to knock on the front door, hoping for a simple explanation, perhaps that the elderly couple had merely overslept or failed to hear the telephone. But the repeated knocks had yielded nothing but an ominous silence. As more family members began to gather outside the apartment, their collective anxiety grew exponentially. They noticed that one of the windows was slightly open, and the interior appeared completely upended. Too terrified to venture inside on their own, they clustered together on the pavement, waiting for the arrival of the police. Officer Weller was the first to arrive at the scene. He had been dispatched quickly, expecting a routine welfare check, the kind that usually ended with an elderly resident reassuring the officer that they were fine. However, as soon as he pulled up and saw the entire family standing outside the apartment complex at such an early hour, he knew the situation was atypical. It was unusual to receive welfare checks so early in the morning, and the palpable fear radiating from the gathered crowd immediately heightened his instincts. Stepping up to the front door, Officer Weller noticed the immediate signs of forced entry and disruption. Upon entering the residence, his eyes swept across the living room, noting the classic telltale signs of a burglary. The apartment was in complete disarray. Furniture was moved, items were scattered, and there was an eerie silence that hung over the rooms. He began calling out into quiet space, his voice echoing off the walls, but no answer came. He checked the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, finding them completely empty. The only space left to inspect was the master bedroom. He walked in, his focus entirely placed on locating the missing couple and ensuring their safety, rather than analyzing the specific state of the room. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty as well. Thinking that perhaps the family had simply gone out for an early morning walk and that everything would turn out fine, Officer Weller turned around to exit the bedroom. As he did, the beam of his flashlight caught the wall next to a very small closet. There, clearly visible against the paint, were distinct hand smudges. A sudden hesitation seized him. Every instinct inside of him screamed not to open that door. A deep gut feeling warning him of the horror that lay beyond. Yet, knowing he would not be doing his job if he left the closet unchecked, he reached out, gripped the handle, and pulled the door open. Inside the cramped space lay the bodies of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They were hog-tied with heavy duct tape, and their heads and mouths were wrapped completely in the gray adhesive material. Blood was splattered across the interior of the closet. In that split second, Officer Weller knew they were dead. With 14 years of law enforcement experience, it was undeniably the most gruesome and brutal scene he had ever witnessed. Shock rendered him temporarily speechless. He walked out of the bedroom, past the scattered belongings, and stood motionless in the middle of the living room. It took a few moments to regain his composure before he could finally operate his radio to request a supervisor in the crime scene unit. When the veteran homicide investigators arrived, including a detective with 21 years of experience in the department. They were profoundly rattled by the sheer violence of the crime. The physical evidence suggested the elderly couple had been beaten with some kind of blunt force object before being placed in the closet. The scene was incredibly violent and bloody, with evidence showing the victims had desperately grabbed at the walls as they were being forced into the back room. In the living room, compact discs were ransacked and furniture was thrown about. The initial theory that crossed the minds of the investigators was a robbery gone wrong. However, the extreme nature of the violence seemed entirely disproportionate for a simple theft. The detective noted significant blunt force trauma to the forehead of the victims, with markings that suggested the potential use of a tool like a hammer. The sheer volume of duct tape used to bind the faces of the elderly couple all the way up to their foreheads indicated a cold, calculated intent to kill. The community was left wondering who could be so heartless as to murder such a gentle, harmless couple who had never bothered anyone. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, seeking the American dream for themselves, their 3 children, and their grandchildren. They settled in Arlington, Texas, a city in Tarrant County known for its diverse cultural tapestry, including a substantial and well-established Vietnamese community that had grown significantly since the late 1970s. The couple established a commercial sewing business, enlisting the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who spoke the best English and served as the public face of the enterprise, dealing directly with contractors. For nearly a decade, the business flourished, eventually securing a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, including well-known entities like Disney. But by the year 2011, their good fortune began to evaporate. They lost the Disney contract, and the business entered a severe downward spiral. Facing bankruptcy, the family turned to traditional spiritual beliefs for protection and healing. In Asian culture, many believe in praying to traditional gods of luck and wealth to protect the business. When facing major life crises, such as divorce, legal trouble, or financial ruin, some families seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The woman advertised herself as someone who could lift bad curses and apply good fortune. Believing she could save their failing business, Chow contacted her and traveled to Houston for a consultation. The advisor performed a ritual, filling the family with renewed hope. However, 1 year later, that hope was utterly shattered by the murders in the Arlington apartment. As the forensic team processed the bloody crime scene, they uncovered items that seemed out of place. On the coffee table sat a plate of crushed prescription pills, arranged as if for consumption, alongside a marijuana cigarette. More significantly, investigators discovered a blue bandana wrapped tightly around a beer bottle. Arlington had a history of active Vietnamese gangs known for extorting local businesses. The light blue bandana immediately caused a homicide team to consult with the gang unit. At first glance, it appeared as though a gang had left their colors behind as a calling card to claim responsibility for the crime. Yet, as the veteran investigators analyzed the scene further, skepticism began to grow. Most local gang members did not commit crimes of the specific, highly personalized nature. The scene began to feel too perfect, too deliberately set up. The detectives began to theorize that the entire burglary and gang presence had been staged to mislead the police. This suspicion led investigators to examine potential financial motives closer to home. They learned of a substantial life insurance policy, totaling at least $1 million, and looked into the beneficiaries. One of the primary beneficiaries was Chow Tran himself. On June 13, 2012, detectives met with Chow at the police station to question him about the business and the large insurance policy. Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the continuity of the commercial sewing business if a family member were to pass away. When questioned about his movements on the night of the murders, Chow provided an airtight alibi, stating that the family had gathered for a birthday party, playing cards until past 10 o'clock in the evening before returning home. The police collected DNA and fingerprint samples from Chow and the other family members, comparing them to the items found at the scene. While they successfully extracted a DNA profile from the marijuana cigarette left on the coffee table, the results provided no immediate answers. The profile did not match any family members, nor did it generate a hit in the federal DNA database, known as CODIS. This suggested the perpetrator might be an adult with no prior felony record, or perhaps a minor whose profile was not legally permitted to be in the system. With no further leads, the case went completely cold for more than 2 years. The breakthrough came unexpectedly in the year 2015. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for stealing a horse in Houston, which constituted a felony in the state of Texas. Because of this felony conviction, his DNA was legally entered into the CODIS database. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old, which was why his profile had never appeared during the initial investigation. The system flagged a perfect match between Willie Guillory and the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette at the crime scene. On October 17, 2015, detectives brought Willie in for questioning under the pretext of a parole violation. When presented with the absolute certainty of the DNA evidence placing him inside the Arlington apartment, the young man broke down in tears and confessed. He stated that he had been present, but insisted he had not acted alone. Willie revealed that in 2012, his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory, had enlisted his help for a job in Arlington. On June 9, 2012, the two made the 3-hour drive from Houston. According to Willie, his uncle possessed a physical key to the apartment, allowing them to enter effortlessly and stage the scene. They threw items around, left the beer bottle, the blue bandana, the pills, and the marijuana cigarette specifically to make the crime look like the work of a local street gang. When the elderly couple returned home, Willie ran toward the door to prevent the woman from escaping or screaming, while Bobby grabbed the gentleman and began beating him with a blunt object to incapacitate him. Once the victim stopped resisting, Bobby used the duct tape to bind them securely before moving them into the bedroom closet, where they were abandoned. When asked for a motive, Willie dropped a bombshell. The entire event was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, who was a close associate of his uncle. Willie claimed Daphne wanted the couple dead because they owed her a massive amount of money and refused to pay. Armed with this information, the police charged Willie with murder and turned their attention to locating Bobby Guillory and investigating Daphne Wright. Daphne operated a popular spiritual advising business in Houston, claiming to bring wealth and remove curses for various families. When detectives attempted to interview Chow Tran regarding his connection to Daphne, Chow immediately directed them to his attorney, signaling to investigators that he was aware the police were closing in on the Houston connection. On December 16, 2015, detectives located and arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory at his residence in Katy, Texas, charging him with 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with a search warrant for his DNA, Bobby also confessed. He explained that he had no prior criminal history, but had been desperate for money after being laid off from his job. Daphne Wright had allegedly offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby described Daphne as a spiritual loan shark. Chow Tran and Hong had accumulated a massive debt to her, ranging between $250,000 and $280,000, because they kept purchasing her services on credit despite the business continuing to fail. When Daphne demanded payment, the family could not produce the funds. Knowing that Chow and his wife stood to inherit a massive payout from the life insurance policies, Daphne allegedly devised a plan to eliminate the elderly couple so the debt could be settled using the insurance proceeds. Crucially, when investigators asked Bobby how Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment, Bobby stated that Daphne had received it directly from Chow Tran. This revelation deeply unsettled the detectives, who had maintained a supportive relationship with Chow throughout the long investigation. On August 31st, 2016, detectives executed an arrest warrant for Daphne right at her Houston home. Inside the residence, they discovered a detailed business ledger revealing that she routinely charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for spiritual services and curses, while Daphne remained completely cold and uncooperative, demanding her attorney. Her husband maintained her innocence, claiming total ignorance of any criminal plot. In an effort to secure a conviction against the primary conspirators, prosecutors ultimately made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran full immunity from prosecution in exchange for his absolute cooperation and truthful testimony against Daphne, Bobby, and Willie. Chow accepted the agreement. He testified that the family had grown terrified of Daphne's alleged spiritual powers, believing she could place a deadly curse on them if the debt remained unpaid. He even claimed that his mother-in-law had initially suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to satisfy Daphne, a claim that investigators found entirely hard to believe. Daphne Wright's capital murder trial commenced on August 26, 2019. Chow took the witness stand, portraying Daphne as an insatiably greedy individual who masterminded the entire plot and forced his hand. The defense fiercely attacked Chow's credibility, noting the complete lack of physical documentation regarding the massive debt and pointing out that the entire $850,000 insurance payout had gone directly into Chow's pocket. They argued that Chow was utilizing the narrative of a mystical mastermind purely to escape accountability for an inside job. In September of 2019, the jury delivered its verdict, convicting Daphne Wright of capital murder. She received the ultimate penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Willie and Bobby Guillory were likewise held accountable for their physical roles in the tragedy. Although the investigators remained frustrated that Chow Tran walked away free due to the immunity agreement, they found solace in the fact that the actual perpetrators who carried out the violence were removed from society. The long journey for justice demonstrated that even the most calculated attempts to obscure the truth would eventually fail, leaving the community to remember the gentle legacy of the two lives lost. The morning sun rose over the city of Arlington, Texas, casting a warm, golden glow across the quiet suburban neighborhoods. It was the 10th of June, 2012, a day that began like any other Sunday, filled with the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant, cheerful chirping of birds. In this vibrant corner of the Lone Star State, communities of different cultures lived side by side, sharing their dreams, their hard work, and their hopes for a brighter future. Among them was a large and close-knit Vietnamese community, whose members had spent decades building new lives while holding fast to the beautiful traditions of their homeland. At 7:29 in the morning, the peaceful silence of the early hours was broken by a phone call to the emergency dispatchers. On the other end of the line was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant, his voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and growing concern. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. When asked for their names, he carefully spelled them out, explaining that his father-in-law was a gentleman in his 70s. Chow explained to the dispatcher that his wife and son had gone to the apartment to check on the couple, only to find a window open and things inside seemingly out of place. Too anxious to step inside themselves, the family waited on the pavement, looking toward the building with heavy hearts, praying that everything would be all right. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington Police Department, was the first to arrive on the scene. With years of experience serving the community, he knew that an early morning welfare check with an entire family waiting anxiously outside was highly unusual. Stepping to the front door of the apartment, he immediately noticed signs of a disturbance. The living room was in disarray, with compact discs scattered across the floor and furniture moved out of place. Calling out for the couple, he was met only with silence. Determined to find them, Officer Weller walked through the quiet hallway. He checked the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, finding no one. Finally, he entered the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty, and a wave of relief washed over him, making him think the sweet elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk in the fresh Texas air. But as he turned to leave, his flashlight caught the faint outline of hand smudges on the wall next to a small closet door. A sudden instinct stopped him in his tracks. Taking a deep breath, he gently opened the door. Inside, the tragic reality unfolded. The beloved elderly couple, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, lay still. The scene was incredibly difficult for the responding officers, leaving even a veteran police force deeply shaken. Officer Weller stepped back into the living room, momentarily unable to speak, before gathering his strength to call for backup and a crime scene investigation unit. When the homicide investigators arrived, led by detectives with over 2 decades of experience, they found themselves facing a deeply perplexing mystery. The apartment had been staged to look like a robbery gone wrong, complete with a blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle, a marijuana cigarette, and crushed prescription pills on the coffee table. To a casual observer, these items suggested the involvement of local street gangs. However, the detectives quickly realized that the scene was almost too perfect, as if someone had deliberately left a trail of clues to lead them astray. They suspected that the entire scene had been carefully arranged to cover up a much more personal and calculated plan. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing with them a deep love for their family and an unwavering commitment to their cultural heritage. Settling in Arlington, they had established a commercial sewing business, pouring their hearts into making high-quality garments. For a long time, their hard work paid off, and they even secured a prestigious contract to manufacture items for a prominent global entertainment giant. They were highly respected, generous, and loved by everyone who knew them, living a life free of enemies or conflict. However, by the year 2011, the tides of fortune had turned. The loss of their major manufacturing contract placed an immense financial strain on the family business. In their search for hope and a way to restore their livelihood, Long and Hong looked to the ancient, traditional beliefs of their homeland. They believed in the power of spiritual guidance to lift the heavy burdens of bad luck and protect their family from bankruptcy. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Le, discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, who operated out of Houston, 250 miles away, promising to dispel curses and bring abundant good fortune to those in need. Daphne seemed like the answer to their prayers. Chow traveled to Houston for a consultation, and the family felt a renewed sense of hope after the first spiritual ritual was performed. Yet, behind the facade of spiritual healing lay a dark and manipulative reality. As the months passed, the family's business did not recover, but Daphne continued to perform increasingly expensive rituals on credit. Over time, the family's debt to her ballooned to a staggering sum between $250,000 and $280,000. Terrified of the spiritual consequences of failing to pay a woman they believed possessed immense supernatural powers, Chow and Hong found themselves trapped in a web of fear and manipulation. During the investigation, detectives discovered that the deceased couple held substantial life insurance policies, totaling over $1 million, with Chow Tran named as a beneficiary. While Chow and his family had airtight alibis for the night of the tragedy, having spent the evening playing cards together until late, the financial connection caught the attention of the authorities. For 2 long years, the case remained cold, leaving the family and the community waiting for answers. But justice has a way of finding its path, even when the trail seems to have gone quiet. In the year 2015, a breakthrough occurred when a young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston on an unrelated felony charge. Because Willie had transitioned from a minor to an adult with a felony conviction, his DNA profile was entered into the national database. To the astonishment of the investigators, his DNA perfectly matched the sample recovered from the marijuana cigarette left at the stage crime, scene in Arlington. When brought in for questioning, Willie, who had been only 16 years old at the time of the crime, quickly broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had been led into the plan by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 49-year-old man who was struggling financially after being laid off from his job. Bobby had been recruited by Daphne Wright, who had offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Daphne, desperate to recoup the massive debt she claimed the family owed her, had devised a plan to eliminate the elderly couple so that the insurance policies could be collected and used to pay her back. In December of 2015, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory, who also confessed to his role, expressing deep remorse and admitting that he had acted out of desperation and fear. He confirmed that Daphne was a true mastermind behind the entire plot, dictating every step of the plan, including how to stage the apartment to look like a gang-related robbery. In August of 2019, Daphne Wright was brought to trial. The courtroom heard powerful testimony detailing how she had used manipulation, fear, and greed to control the lives of others, turning a family's search for spiritual comfort into a heartbreaking tragedy. Although the defense argued against the credibility of the witnesses, the jury saw through the deception. Daphne was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she could no longer harm others. The story of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu is a deeply moving reminder of the strength of family, the search for the American dream, and the ultimate triumph of justice. While the community of Arlington was deeply saddened by the loss of two of its sweetest and most hard-working members, the dedication of the police force and the power of truth brought a sense of peace and resolution to those they left behind. Their memory lives on in the hearts of their children and grandchildren, serving as an inspiring testament to the enduring power of love, hope, and the human spirit. In the heart of Texas, where the vast sky stretches out like an endless blue canvas over the flat prairie, the city of Arlington hummed with the quiet industry of thousands of families striving to build their lives. Among them, the neighborhood stood as a vibrant testament to the enduring human spirit of migration and renewal. For many who arrived after the historic events of 1975 and the subsequent waves of families who followed in the late 80s and 90s, this warm corner of the world became a sanctuary. It was a place where old traditions met new opportunities, where the rich aroma of traditional noodle soup drifted from open kitchen windows to mingle with the sweet scent of Texas pecan trees. In the year 2000, Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu, chose to pack up the remnants of their lives in Vietnam and embark on a grand journey across the ocean. They did not come merely for themselves. They came to plant deep roots for their 3 children and their growing circle of grandchildren. Long was a man of quiet dignity, with gentle eyes that had seen decades of change, and a smile that could instantly put a stranger at ease. Hong was the vibrant, beating heart of the household, a woman whose culinary skills were legendary among their neighbors and whose devotion to her family knew no bounds. They brought with them very little in the way of material wealth, but they possessed an abundance of hope, a shared work ethic, and a deep-seated belief in the American dream. Upon settling in Texas, they did what so many industrious families do. They looked to their own hands to carve out a living. They established a commercial sewing business, setting up rows of heavy industrial sewing machines in a modest workshop. To help manage the daily operations, they enlisted the support of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a sharp 38-year-old man who spoke fluent English and possessed a natural knack for business negotiation. Chow quickly became the public face of the enterprise, representing the family in discussions with contractors, handling shipping logistics, and navigating the complex landscape of local commercial agreements. For nearly a decade, their dedication bore magnificent fruit. The gentle, rhythmic hum of the sewing machines became the soundtrack to their success. They secured lucrative contracts to manufacture beautiful, high-quality garments for some of the largest commercial giants in the world, including beloved entertainment brands like the Disney enterprise. During those golden years, their home was filled with laughter, abundance, and the warmth of a family that had successfully bridged two distinct worlds. They were respected figures in the local Vietnamese community, always ready to offer a helping hand, a kind word, or a traditional blessing to those starting on their own paths. Chapter 2: The Gathering Shadows. However, the tides of commerce are as unpredictable as the autumn winds. By the year 2011, the steady stream of prosperity began to falter. A major manufacturing contract was lost to overseas competitors, and the family workshop, once bustling with activity and joy, grew increasingly quiet. The financial strain began to weigh heavily on the family, casting a long shadow over the elderly couple. In times of deep uncertainty, people often reach back to the ancient wisdom of their ancestors for comfort and guidance. For generations, traditional Eastern beliefs held that the universe operates on a delicate balance of spiritual energies. When bad luck persists, it is often viewed not merely as a series of unfortunate events, but as a spiritual imbalance or a lingering cloud of negative energy that must be carefully cleared. Long and Hong, holding fast to the spiritual heritage of their homeland, believed that inviting a spiritual advisor to perform a cleansing ritual could restore harmony to their lives and revitalize their fading business. It was Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong, who eventually found an advertisement in a local Vietnamese language newspaper. The notice spoke of a prominent spiritual advisor located in Houston, a bustling metropolis situated roughly 250 miles away. The advisor, a 44-year-old woman named Daphne Wright, claimed to possess the rare ability to lift heavy curses, bestow blessings of prosperity, and align the spiritual forces of luck and fortune for those in dire need. Hoping to find a beacon of light in their dark times, Chow made the long drive to Houston to consult with Daphne in her beautifully decorated office. Filled with the soothing scent of incense and the gentle chiming of brass bells, Daphne welcomed him with open arms. She performed elaborate rituals, burning sacred papers, and chanted